Hello, everyone. Hello.
Good morning, Marcus.
Good morning. Everybody can hear me? Sana, can you hear me? Everybody can hear me?
Yeah.
Loud and clear. Hi.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Sachi. Okay. Sana, I can't hear you at all. Sachi, you have her presentation, right? You're going to put up her presentation. Good. All the presentation you have them.
Yes.
I cannot. Sana, you're only on video. You're not connected, really.
It shows she's connecting to audio. So
Yeah, I think she is struggling to connect for some reason. I'm not sure why. Yeah. Okay, well, let's see how it goes. All right, well, listen, we will wait for people to sign in. But in principle, there are quite a few people signed in, but we'll see how many show up. So we've opened and letting people coming in as we go. Hi, Sam. Hi, Sergio.
Good morning, Marcus.
Good morning. Good morning. Okay, let's see what we have. Kate. Oh, there's Kate. Yeah, we have a very, yeah. So young. Okay. Kate, can you hear me? Kate?
Yeah, hi Andre, how are you?
I'm well, ma'am. How are you? Good to hear you.
Yes, nice to see you. Here I am. I'll turn my video off though.
No, it's okay. But why? We would like to see people. We haven't seen people in ages. It's like, hey, like out coming out of the bunker.
Yeah, well, in this instance, unfortunately, I'm trying to monitor two calls tonight, two overlapping calls.
Okay, all right. So you're not gonna be 100%. I'm joking. It's okay.
Yeah, no, that's right. I apologize.
That's okay, Kate. So young, good to see you.
Happy New Year.
Oh, happy New Year. Yes, we're still in the Happy New Year mode. Yeah, I think that I need to remind a few people, including Mr. Hessian, I think. Okay, let's see how many so far. It's about 10%. No, it's about 10%, about 15%. On my way, says Martin. Okay. There you go. Sana, can you hear me?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. No, because
Right.
I was a little bit worried at some point you were just kind of showing somewhere between being here and not being here. So I want to make sure that everybody's here.
Thanks a lot.
No problem. And Thomas. And Diego, okay. It's quite okay. Well, isn't this amazing?
Nice to meet.
Folks, yeah, and okay. We're still waiting for people. Hi, Martin, can you hear us?
Yeah, hello. Hello, everybody. Just give me a minute.
Hi. And Thomas, can you hear as well? Diego, I can see you there.
Yeah, I can hear you. Hi.
Hi. And Kazu. James.
Great.
Hi,
How are
James,
you?
how are you? Hi, Kazu, good to see you.
Hi. Good to see you.
Hey, Perval. Maria just signed in. Well, look, looks like family almost. Isn't this strange? You know, after all these years, we know each other. So Kazu, it's what? It's now in Japan. It is 9.
I think it's getting used to it, to do
Well,
some meeting on this
I
time.
know, I know. For you, it is. Yeah, we try as much as we pulled it out 1 hour just to allow people to be a little bit earlier, but it then gets early on the other side. So we try. I think we're gonna have to wait till about 5 minutes after, so we couple another 2-3 minutes as people come in. I'm just looking. Molly and Felipe are not here, so let me send an email to Molly. Okay.
1,000 volts.
He said it was for rice.
Is that one small?
We're still waiting for a few people. I said at some point we're gonna start because I think we have quite a busy agenda, but we'll wait for. I mean, the people that I would have liked to see with Molly, who we spoke earlier today, and Felipe, whom I don't see, because those are in the first sort of to speak. I have taken the liberty of muting everybody, so but people can unmute themselves anytime they want, just to make sure that it doesn't. I mean, we like it rowdy, but not totally rowdy. And there's Molly. So the only person that is not here from the first panel will be Felipe de Leon, whom I Well, folks, I think that, we had over 100. It is 60 people that are currently present. Please, anytime you want to unmute yourself and kind of the best thing to do, the easiest thing to do, show up on the screen and kind of, if there's more people, just raise your hand or, electronically or raise your hand. Otherwise, does not make this very, very complicated. I think we know each other. We have been very, very informal in the past. Let's keep the informality flowing. And, if there are people that feel not everybody knows everybody, hi, Martin, good to see you. Then I would suggest that we, yes. What we will do, we will kind of go through a few kitchen things, I think that people want to mention, but let's get started. Look, in case you're in the wrong plane, which is unlikely, this is an Article 6 informal dialogue organized by a European Roundtable on Climate Change and Sustainable Transition. We've been doing this now for a number of years, and it's almost like it's part of my life since I've been doing this before Paris. But first of all, for those of you who haven't met her yet, my colleague, I think you have met her, but for those of you who haven't, I would reintroduce my colleague Sachi Voha, who is working with me on Article 6 matter. Sachi is based in New Delhi, and as such is the unfortunate part that sometimes she stays late in order to work with people that also stay late in Brussels, but we try to minimize it. Sachi comes from Terry, and we're very happy to have her. We will be in contact with her as we will continue this program. Now, the intention is that we will continue the program as we know it now. This program has been very, very accelerated, very intense during 2021, and there was a good reason for that. I think we've congratulated each other quite a lot over the results in Glasgow, and we're very happy. We're still having those pictures. As you can see, I have a little thingy here that I got from Amy. I think some of you have it, but I also put it with some pride in there. I hope Amy is joining us. Amy is not a negotiator anymore, not a secretariat anymore, but I always told her that she's invited and our door is open because she's been part of the family for so long that it would be unnatural not to invite her. The other thing that I wanted to say, there are a couple of announcements that we would like to make as we move forward. One announcement is that, again, we will have this calls, probably going to be not as intense, but we have it today. And the other announcement that I have to make is that we will have a face-to-face meeting, which will take place in my favorite place for meetings, which is Glion, Switzerland. And it will be April 20, 21st, and 22nd half of a day. So that is Thursday, that is Wednesday, Thursday, and half of Friday. And for those of you who want to stay in Switzerland after that, I think you've got Friday, Saturday, second half of Friday and Saturday. So you will get an email now and an invitation for those of you that will need financial assistance and assistance with the visa. You will do so. We have limited resources for getting people there. We will use them reasonably and we'll give obviously priority to those that we know have been very active in this discussion. So that is one thing. Second thing, Kazu, you have an announcement to make as well. Kazu, do you want to make it? Let's make the announcement now and get it over with while people still come in. Kazu?
Okay, thank you, Andre, and also happy to see you all. And again, start our this new year after the historic agreement in Glasgow. And again, I really respect Andre for you to continue convening this important meetings, which is a foundation us to work on. So again, let me just appreciate for your continuous work. And again, for the announcement, which is that we are now implementation mode of the Article 6, although we recognize there are still some rooms that we need to decide this year. But at the same time, I think we all need to be in full implementation mode. So for this purpose, the Ministry of Environment are going to organize the international conference for the implementation of Article 6. And for the purpose of this meeting, the conference is to focus on the implementation, not negotiation. So we wanted to hear from those countries which are engaging already in their activities bilaterally, multilaterally. We wanted to hear from them about the experience as well as the what is needed for the implementation of Article 6. As you know, that Japan is implementing joint credit mechanism since 2013. And also we wanted to inform that we are now in the process of developing the Japanese government authorization for ITOMOS, as well as the application of corresponding adjustment based on the agreement in COP26. So we are progressing from our end, and also wanted to share those experiences with others in order to implement and also facilitate the implementation of Article 6, which is necessary for this critical decade. So we are organizing this in two series. One is the February 17th, actually next Thursday. And we are now arranging the speakers and wanted to share with some of the existing mechanisms as well as all the support for the capacity building and also the ongoing the programs and lessons learned such as from Corsia and also some application to voluntary market. So that's the introduction of the first one. And then we are also planning to the second meeting, which is March 7th, where we intended to invite those practitioners who are really working on the ground to support implementation of Article 6. So we have a regional collaboration center from the UNCC Secretariat, as well as there is a regional alliance in many parts of the world. And many multilateral or regional the banks supporting, and I'm sure there are many other initiatives up there. So we wanted to hear from those what they are currently doing, and also try to identify what kind of capacity building activities that is necessary for the implementation of Article 6, and also how we can identify the synergies and the coordinations that is necessary to facilitate the implementation of Article 6. So again, we are going to organize this online, and we will share those informations to all of you for your participation. And again, this is the start of the this year, and then of course follow-up activities will follow for the implementation of the activity. So looking forward to having all of your participation. So thanks, Andre, for this.
Well, Kazu, we're here a big family, and we're here to work with you and support you to the degree, and each of us supporting each other because we have a common goal in this. I'm sure that Perumal will have his own announcement in due course whenever you are ready for those announcements, Perumal. But I want to repeat, ERCST would have its traditional face-to-face meeting April 20, 21st, and half of 22nd, that is Wednesday, Thursday, half of Friday, in Lyon, Switzerland, which is just above Montreux. And it is being done in collaboration with the UK presidency, with the incoming Egyptian presidency, and the host country, the government of the Swiss Confederation. So you will receive, we are in the process also drafting the agenda, considering the discussions we'll have today. We already had consultation with the presidencies and want to make sure that what we do is in collaboration and it is helping the process. So all the announcements are out of the way. Happy to say that. So now we are facing the first year, I think, without text. There is no text. So we have all kinds of mandates, some of them more precise than others, some of them with submission, some of them without submission. But first thing that I would like to do is to ask my friend Perumal, who's probably very lonely now without Amy, because these guys are always hanging around together. I mean, I don't know how it feels, Perumal, to be like kind of not hearing Amy saying Peru, Peru. I don't know. It probably sounds unnatural in a way. But I'd like to welcome you and again, give you the floor to start the discussions today. Give us a little bit of an overview of the submission that are due in Article 6. And some of them are, again, there are mandates, there are submissions. Just give us an overview from the point of view of Secretariat, how you guys see this stuff going forward. Go ahead, Pete Perumal.
Yeah, thank you, Andre. Hello, everyone. Good to be connected again through this meeting, through this channel of ERCST. And thanks, Andre, for reminding. I think each of us might be missing Amy here, being very closely associated. But I could hear that somewhere she's telling Peru somewhere. I was sneezing just before the meeting. So, I think like you all might have gone through the decisions by now, so I would not bore you much, but I think I thought that I would put together in a shorter version to elaborate on what we are expecting, starting from now until the meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh in November. So I would again go by 6.2, 6.4, and 6.8. So in 6.2, we are expecting 2 submissions. One submission on the topics of tables, outlines, and electronic format for reporting. And the other one is for the options for implementing the infrastructure. So here, the invitation for submissions has been requested, and the due date or the deadline for the submission is on the 31st March 2022. And then there's a mandate for the Secretariat to organize a technical workshop on these 2 topics, the table outline, electronic format for reporting, and also for the option for implementing the infrastructure. The initial thoughts like we would be hearing from friends and colleagues later in the session. So here the Secretariat has to organize a technical workshop among the parties to develop options. So in this technical workshop, the mandate is to develop options for tables, reports, and the infrastructure related issues. And then this will feed into the SubSTA meeting in June. The SubSTA has to consider on the basis of the submission and also taking into account of the options that are developed and to make a recommendation for the consideration and adoption by the end of the year. So we have a submission, we have a workshop, and then the workshop to identify options, develop options, and these options along with the submissions to be considered in June. And then over the course of the year, the Secretariat would also, as per mandate, to undertake capacity building all around the year. The capacity building in consultation with parties and programs, including through RCCs, we have 3 identified areas in our decision. One is to support the development of institutional arrangements, including reporting. Then help parties to ensure that cooperation would support ambition and also assist LDCs and SITs in meeting the participation requirements. And then by the end of the year in November, the SASTA is expected to deliver 4 outputs from Article 6.2, including on the development of tables and outlines, guidelines for reviews, recommendations on infrastructure, etc. Then with respect to Article 6.4, there's no specific submission that is being expected, but like on the over the year capacity building support through RCCs, there were 2 areas identified. One is institutional arrangements, and the other one is in relation to designing and setting up baseline for application in host party. So those are the 2 identified areas. But in between the Substa 56 and Substa 57 and the CMA 4 in June and November, as per the mandate, the 6.4, the supervisory body has to at least meet twice in 2022. There are a lot of work that is being delegated for the supervisory body to be delivered as per the decision 3 CMA 3. In particular, like these are available in para 5 and 6, as you know, but main things are like in terms of rules of implementation, then the implementation of the removal activities, SOP to adaptation fund, review and approval of methodologies, accreditation of DOEs, etc. The SASTA has a mandate to deliver on issues related to the further roles and responsibilities for the supervisory body and parties that are hosting Article 6.4 activities, reporting by host parties on their 6.4 activities, additional scope on avoidance. That's another topic which Andre has listed today, later in the session today. And also the process for implementation of mechanism registry, SOP, OMG, transition of activities, use of CERs towards first updated NBCs, etc. So there's quite a lot of things that needs to be done by the SASTA in 56 and 57. Then when we go to Article 6.8, this is the first one where we need to have our submissions, which is the submission deadline by parties and observers are to be submitted by the end of February 2022, which is like in less than 20 days from now. So here there are 4 topics that are identified, like the facilitation of existing non-market-based approaches, potential additional focus areas, then the operationalization of the UNFCCC web-based platform, and the basic outline of how that platform might look would be later presented by my colleague Sana in the next session, and also like the schedule for implementing the work program activities. So these are the 4 topics or areas by which the submissions has been requested. And then between February to June, the synthesis of this submission needs to be undertaken for the consideration by SASTA in June. And in June, we have a mandated in-session workshop on the 2 identified topics. The 2 topics are developing and implementing tools for recording and exchanging information on NMAs. And then the second one was related to identifying and sharing information, best practices, lessons learned, and case studies in relation to development and implementation of non-market-based approaches. Then in June, also in that session, we would have the Glasgow committee, will be convened by the SASTA chair following the operational modalities of a contact group. And then between June to November, there's a mandate to prepare a report from the in-session workshop for the consideration of Glasgow committee by November 2022. Then also between June and November, we have to have the multi-layer work program schedule and function forms, UNFCCC web platform, etc. And then the progress of the NMA has to be prepared between June and November. And then by the end of November, we would have the consideration of the mandated report by the Glasgow Committee on NMA on the progress and the outcomes of the work program. So we have quite a full-fledged work plan that is being laid out for the whole year. There are things which are coming from submissions followed by a workshop and then a session. There are certain aspects which are delegated to supervisory body to deliver, and there are certain aspects that needs to be undertaken by the SUSTA over the year. And also in the introduction, I think Andre said about the other submissions. There are like close to 26 call for submissions from the Glasgow outcome. And yeah, of course, always like SUSTA will have the highest number. So SUSTA has about 7, and of which 3 are from Article 6. But I do not see any direct link or relationship between any of those submissions that have been called for. They're much more broader adaptation issues, the GCF, JEF, finance, etc. But yeah, altogether, we are expecting 26 submissions over the year from the Glasgow outcome. I think it's enough of boring and we can get into infrastructure. Back to you, Andre.
Boring it may be, but I think it's going to hit a lot of people like a tsunami, because in Brussels, and those of you who are Europeans who know that we've been besieged by the European Green Deal and the Fit for 55 package, which is an enormous amount of reacting to all kind of policy proposals from the Commission, and different other acts and so on. And in here, it's no less of a tsunami with so many submissions. Some of them more, how should I put it? Some of them more structured, some of them with submissions, some of them mandates. I remember there's something about appeals. I think there's review. There's all kind of things in there. And I think that at some point, maybe not in the session, but certainly in the session in June, in April in Lyon, one of the things that we would like to give the opportunity to have a discussion about the way, the priority. How do we prioritize? Do we prioritize? What does the mode of work? I think again, we're here to help the process. There's a different ways of looking at this, and in the way of looking at this, one could argue that there are different steps that one could imagine of this. Sort of, I think we had a discussion, and one was a bit of ideas and identification, and then understanding, the understanding phase, and then discussions in Bonn. I think that came from one of the people that we were yesterday on the call with. So I think that we are very much now coming, kind of the family getting back together and beginning to get our brains back in gear and thinking about issues. I think the meeting that Kazu has outlined is also going to get people more alert. But again, Japan is doing much more of an implementation. We're still in the negotiation part of the debate. Now, is anybody wants to raise anything with Perumal? Any questions that anybody wants to raise with Perumal? Just show up on the screen and say what you need to say. And let's be Martin.
Hi, everybody. And thanks, Andre. Yeah, I guess we're in a completely new phase, and we're going to have a lot of work to do. We've been reviewing the decisions and what it is we need to do, and I'm sure many people are in the same boat as me. It's not just negotiation items, like we need to develop those things that we've said we will develop within the UN. I've also had to kind of go to colleagues and say, look, we're going to need to implement the reporting, we're going to need to implement the infrastructure, we have to have opinions on these various things. So there's quite a lot of explaining to my domestic colleagues about what we need to put in place. And for me, that's as much a part of my job now as the negotiations at this stage, just to make sure that we are ready to implement. So we're looking at the registry requirements, we're looking at the reporting requirements, also looking at our linking with Switzerland, etc., and trying to make sure that we have everything done, or at least a process initiated to do them. So it's far from boring. I kind of agree with Andre. It's really interesting to know what is on the agenda. And that's my question to you, Parimal. The agenda for the substa itself, which is always a focus for the negotiations. We know we've got these submission deadlines that are very clear, but it would also, I think, really be useful to understand a little bit about the agenda for substa and how that will look. Because I'm counting quite a lot of agenda items if you look at all the things that have been referred to substa. And I wondered if you had more information on that.
Very
Yeah,
well. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I think like in the last head of delegation informal meeting organized by the presidency, I think the substa chair came forward with two things. Like I think he's currently in the process of preparing the draft provisional agenda, and at least the substa chair wanted to streamline the number of agenda items as much as possible. And as you have seen, there are so many, and he's working on them. And also, I think he's intending to publish a scenario note on how to organize this work around these different aspects, like including, as you elaborated on, there are certain implement elements and kind of what needs to be undertaken. So it's still in the cooking process, but the draft provisional agenda, I think, would be published sometime by end of this month, if I'm not mistaken, by the substa chair, and also followed by a scenario note within a period of a month or month and a half. Hope that clarifies, Martin.
Sergio, anything from your side?
Yeah, Peru, good morning, good evening to all colleagues. Just a quick question, Peru. I think I heard you state that you were going to present something that you as a secretary are going to move forward or are going to try to show to us during the course of this presentation. Is this something that you're trying to do prior to the synthesis report that is requested by the decision, or did I capture that wrong?
No. This informal platform, I said that one of my colleagues is available today to be talking about the initial outlay of how a reporting platform or web-based platform might look. It's purely on informal basis, nothing on we are doing something before the synthesis.
No. Just wanted to know. Thank you very much. Good to see you.
You woke me up.
All the best.
Good. Anyone else? Let's remember this, and that this is an informal. I mean, it's an informal process. We've all respected it for the last 6 years, and it has helped. So let's keep it informal and keep it outside the discussion of the UNFCCC. Nobody has, in my last 5 years or 6 years of activity, ever referred in direct discussion that I remember, Martin. Nobody ever referred to what was discussed here. So I think that is the beauty of this process. Let's keep it that way. Okay, so Peru. So since Amy is not here, thank you very much for this. But jump in anytime, and I think we very much appreciate you taking the time and doing this. Now, options for implementation infrastructure under Article 6.2. Now, I have to admit that I have read this many times, and together with my colleague Sashi, and spoken to a few people, and my eyes are still glazing and my eyes are still crossed. I have to tell you that. It ain't easy. I don't know what you guys, I think this is a bunch of you who understand this stuff and that have written this stuff and had something very clear in mind, or had maybe not the same thing, but have very clear things in mind. But in order to make submissions, I think the first thing is you need to understand is what are the problems? What is exactly the model, or some imagination of the model, and understand what some people had in mind. So you can figure out what are the questions you want to ask yourself. What are the options? I mean, do I have a problem, or just, I don't care about this and you guys do what you want because it doesn't affect me? Is it true or not? But I'm quite sure that there are people in this group that will want the more precise, much more transparency. Other people want the high granularity. So it's going to be a variety of things. Interesting. So this session is very much, since this is the first time that we're discussing after this, and it's been discussed in the technical workshop that the chair of Substa was convened about a year and a bit ago, which are very useful. But this is the first time that we start to have a discussion about what's in the text and what we understand it to be the text. What are the kind of the friction points, if there are any friction points, and what are the options, or what are the questions that we need to do this. So the session is to understand the architecture of the various elements of the Article 6 infrastructure and what is the function, the main issues related to infrastructure that need clarification, and the vision of different intervenors. So I think this is going to be an iterative process. We are now early on. Submissions are due at the end of March, so there is time in this particular discussion. There may be another discussion on this topic for people to clarify and understand, so they can make useful submission. And then there may be an opportunity. There's a technical workshop that will be much more precise because it will be part of the process. There will be our informal dialogue in Lyon, where we can continue to discuss these things, leading us to the discussion in Bonn in June, which we hope is going to be in Bonn in June and not another virtual thingy. So what I will do is I will try. I'm kind of hesitated to embarrass myself, but I decided that there's I remember a greater personality than me said there are no stupid questions, there are only stupid answers. So I will put what I think I understand, and if everybody, I muted everybody so you can't laugh. But I will start this, and then Sana will continue. Molly, Martin, Felipe, they're doing quite a bit of work in Costa Rica, and then Kazu. So I will start, and let me do this and tell you how far is my thinking of this, which is not very far. But what I would say is that. So what are the objectives in general? First of all, is that we need to understand the text and understand what is the model. Identify the issues for discussion. So in order to have a discussion, we have to understand what the issues are. What are the issues? If you want to have options, you have to have something to have options around. And use the pre-Substa sessions to prepare for negotiations. There will be submissions, or there will be visions being expressed in those submissions, at least the way we would understand it. But then there will be the the technical workshop, our informal dialogue, maybe others, or OECD maybe will have something, I don't know. But there will be other opportunities to prepare people for have a good discussion in Bonn in June. So at least my understanding, which is a very simplistic way, the components of infrastructure is registry, database, and the card. And again, the registries, the way we understand the function of the infrastructure, and maybe we're missing something, is to avoid double counting, to store information regarding Article 6 activities provided through reports, make information public through the CARP. We understand the CARP to be a platform that would, if you want, would put information and make it available to public in a certain format that would be useful to the stakeholders, and then provide information for the review, which is an important element, and provide information for accounting. Now, if you want, we had a lot of trouble kind of going through the initial report, all the reporting, and what happens to this reporting. Where does it go and how does it happen? So we look at the initial reporting, we understand that this data is more qualitative in nature for each ITMO, and is stored in the CARP to be made available publicly. That's the way we would understand it, and if it's wrong, happy to be wrong. When does this exactly take place? We understand that it should take place at each time there's a new ITMO. That's the way in the, what is the format of an initial report? It's something that is unclear. Will there be an initial issuance that will have an identifier? So that's important, because if you have to be able to connect what's in the different pieces in the initial reporting, in the other reports, And how do you connect this except if it both have a same identifier? If it will do not have a same identifier, I think they're going to have a great amount of difficulty of connecting these pieces of information. Where will this be stored? Again, we understand that will be stored in the CARP, and is there a unique format in which this initial reporting is being made? Now, the annual information, the way we understand is that this annual information is provided before April 15 of the following year, and is provided for each ITMO. We understand it to be quantitative in nature and being stored in the database. Now, what we're not quite clear, how is the information, the database connected to the information from the initial reporting? Unless there is a connection through this unique identifier, and how that connection is being made would be very interesting for somebody to elaborate a bit more, people that are smarter and have thought through this. And what is the relationship between this articles 20A and 20B, and this paras 20A and 20B? How do they relate? Because it's also somewhat unclear from the report. And then you have regular information. We see this, we understand it as being qualitative and quantitative. There's two pieces. We understand it to be stored in the database and in the CARP. That at least the understanding we have. And it's an annual thing reported in the biannual transparency report. Paragraph 23 is quantitative in nature, and the information will be submitted annually. Is there overlap between annual reporting information? Is there an update of the annual report? How do they relate? And how is information connected to information in initial report? Does it use an ITMO identifier or some other identifier? One of the things that I think is unclear, and probably it bothers my sense of order, which is used to, if you're on the normal registries, the normal market instruments that we know, whether we knew under the Kyoto Protocol with the ITL and the registries, and things were floating, and we understood very well how it works. Where when we have an emission trading scheme in Europe, we understand how that works. This looks like there's a lot of pieces, but what are the commonalities, and how you kind of flow? How do you put the information together, and how you identify the different pieces? That to us sounds less clear. We understand the registry to be national, so the national registry or be part of the UNFCCC International Registry. You can hold it in there the way we understand it. Is this information in the registry only to be used by the party? Is something that is transparent? Is this at the pleasure of the party? Is the information in the registry connected directly to the database, or it is used to, is it standardized? Is there a standardized format for the registry? We understand that may not be the case, but is there a connection between the database and the registry, or is the registry just used to produce information for the reports that then go into the database? So these are things that I think would be interesting to hear different people talk. Now, the database, which is the piece that we understand source information received from annual and regular reporting, that's quite clear. Again, how do we connect that information to the initial reporting? Because if somebody wants to understand what an ITMO is and what it comes from and the methodology and so on, that is the initial reporting. Is there a connection between these two? Probably there is. It's got to be this identifier, the initial identifier. It seems to be referring to the participating party in the vintage activity type and sector. So these are kind of some of the things that, if you want, in a very rough way at this very early stage, we have talked about and tried to understand. I think we have our own opinion and we understand in a certain way. But with that, I'll stop and I'll pass it to somebody much smarter than me. I'll pass it on to Sana.
Certainly not, Andre. Hello to everyone. Thank you for having me. Andre, thank you for selecting this topic. It's an early opportunity for us to share some views, but also to test some of our thinking and ideas. It's really good timing for that. I will also use a few slides because it's a dense topic. maybe not necessarily regrettably, we didn't have a chance to exchange with you beforehand, so we'll probably have slight overlaps here and there, but this is not necessarily bad, as it will help us drive some of the points. It's the first time I present here, so allow me just to share that I'm working on data services within the mitigation division for over a decade now, including on the CDM registry, and that I have been on the Article 6 team since 2019, not least to support information requirements. We can go to the next slide, Sachi. So I will go over the key functions of the infrastructure components in a moment, but before that, allow me to state the obvious, which is that a fit-for-purpose infrastructure responds to clear objectives and requirements. We do have a wide range of technology solutions and experiences to build on, but this alone is not enough. And technical solutions don't deal well with ambiguity. So successful implementation will depend on clear, complete, and aligned requirements, and the resources and skills are just as relevant here. So considering that the primary objective of the infrastructure is to enable parties to meet their tracking and reporting obligations, we can derive most of the requirements from the sections on infrastructure and from the reporting provisions. What I'm trying to underscore here is that there is a very close link and probably some sequencing between reporting and infrastructure. So this really needs to be kept inside. But as you stated, Andre, in your background note, significant further elaboration is needed in the light of the experience with the KP, but more importantly, of course, with the Paris architecture in mind. And this means rethinking much of the operational modalities of the infrastructure components, with understanding of how this would impact on cooperation between parties. So harmonization and alignment remain relevant concepts, applying them to the infrastructure, reporting and review techniques will ensure not just efficiency, but also maximum transparency and high level of assurance in the overall accounting and reporting cycle. Kyoto implemented a fully integrated system for tracking and validating units, which simplified the reporting and review cycle, if I can say so in some way. The 6.2 guidance shifts towards greater flexibility and self-determination in cooperation, which in turn requires extending the scopes of the reporting and review. To illustrate this, what I mean here is that the review, for example, is expected to address inconsistencies which are identified in which the infrastructure alone may not be able to resolve, just like the ITL did in the past. We can go to the next slide. So, Andre, you already spoke about the different components of the infrastructure. We have summarized them here. This is a slide that we included in a slide deck that we shared last year during one of the ITEDs on reporting and review. So I'm not going to go in detail, but I've just mentioned that in the registry systems, we include all registries, the national, the international, and the mechanism. And I'll jump directly to say that the 6.2 text, in addition to functions, talks about architecture, namely that the CAP includes the database and the international registry. We understand that this kind of integration was prescribed with a view to efficiency of operations, and in principle, we share this view, but solution architecture and technological choices best respond to well-defined requirements. So once these requirements are well elaborated, they may be even point for deeper integration. For example, the international registry and the mechanism registry will be subject to common guidance and will be connected. So it's probably easy to imagine that these registries are built on common technology while keeping them virtually separated. With regard to the CARP and the database, Andrea, you spoke about it in just before a moment. There was some effort to designate the database as the repository for quantitative information and the CARP for the qualitative. But most of the timing of the reporting of various information complicated this. And now quantitative data will come through different reports. This is not likely to be much of a challenge if the CARP and the database share the same database management solution, for example. This whole issue could be managed through the reporting formats and how these reporting formats are stored in the database. Probably to better imagine the functions of the CARP and the database, it may be helpful to think of them as the front end and the back end of the same platform, whereby the Article 6 database is the back end and the public interface is the front end. Overall integration of the tools at the international level will optimize performance, will drive costs down, it will benefit user experience, and integration is also relevant to national registries. So to illustrate this point, Sachi, we can move to the next slide. I'm going to use another slide, a revised picture of the same slide deck that we used last year. On the left-hand side, you see the CARP with the database and the international registry. And on the left-hand side, the national registries and the mechanism registry. The red dotted lines indicate the information, the reporting flows, and the thick black line in the middle indicates that the mechanism registry and the international registry can exchange data, or at least this is our reading of paragraph 63 of the 6.4 text. As already mentioned by you, Andre, there is no connection specified for national registries. We have heard from parties that not all see a need for national registries to connect to the international registries. The question is, could this change with time? What if parties that operate their standalone registries or participate in a club of connected registries in the context of cooperative approach wish to access ITMOS in the international registry? Is applying for accounts in a national registries a viable option for such parties? If yes, such parties will have to draw for their reporting requirements from more than one registry. And the question here is, can a registry have more than one national registry, or can it use more than one registry, given that the text in paragraph 29 speaks of a registry per party? Or could this registry at the national level be somewhat of a meta registry which integrates other national and subnational solutions and systems? Let me just mention here that the World Bank is experimenting for some time in this space, and it would be useful to have parties' views on that. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is just very briefly here. This is just a graph that I pulled from the NDC synthesis report. It is just to illustrate that 3/4 of the parties have indicated international cooperation in their NDC submissions. And while this is significant, we still know very little about how parties want to use registries in particular. From our perspective, knowing more will certainly help inform the operations of the international registry at the minimum. We can go to the next slide. I will now just say a few more words on other issues that we see of need of further elaboration. I can only barely scratch the surface here, but we can provide technical input as necessary, including through the workshop. So on an issue that we see would require further elaboration is the governance and funding, as well as the operational procedures for the international infrastructure. Some experience could be drawn from the ITL, but the funding, for example, will probably require more varied options. Authorization is a significant new area. Authorizations are relevant to purpose views and timing of obligation for corresponding adjustments. It's a very high impact area. Authorizations are high impact area which really impacts on all components of the system. So we see this topic and authorizations as suitable for some form of standardization, in a way that their parameters, the parameters expressed in the authorizations can be integrated in the system in an easy way, be tracked, recorded, and checked for consistencies. Something more on the registries. Just like Andre, you mentioned earlier, we anticipate some guidance to be needed on assigning identifiers, but more importantly, how to map those identifiers to the reporting formats to populate the Article 6 database. Transaction rules, for example, can take the form of recommended standards. For the international registry, we have the question of administration. This is also linked to the governance topic above. We anticipate the Secretariat operating the technology, but probably training and outsourcing the administration at the national level for those countries that don't implement their registries, but are clients of the international registry. So this registry could potentially be complex to manage, but there is a good experience out there we can draw on. Finally, on reporting, we see quite a few issues there that will impact either on the infrastructure development or on the modalities for its operation. Just very briefly, one question that comes to our mind is with respect to how, what would be the ITMO measurements that that needs to be tracked, particularly for non-GHG. I hope that there is some consistency in the understanding that ITMOs will translate into tons of CO2 equivalent. Another topic is how to handle reporting, particularly if there is a delay in the reporting of information and if inconsistencies are identified vis-a-vis information which is already subject to review. Another question is how parties who participate in the mechanism should, or at what point rather, their reporting obligations under 6.2 will be triggered. So this list is not exhaustive. I'll leave it at that. We can go to the last slide, Sachi. The list is not exhaustive, but to put the open issues in context, I just want to say something about planning and timelines. It would not be possible to advance implementation of the infrastructure before clarifying the requirements. This is why we expect that 2022 will be focused on guidance, and the infrastructure implementation can probably only begin and pick up around 2023. How long it will take, it will depend on the complexity of the choices or the complexity of the options that are chosen, as well as the availability, of course, of resources. So to support cooperation that involves over time, the infrastructure will need to be responsive and to be capable of scaling up. Governance, funding of the international infrastructure authorization, and connectivity of registries, some of these key outstanding issues. And we will be looking forward to your inputs and your views on that in elaborating them further. I'll stop at that, Andre, back to you.
Thank you, Sana. I think that this is, I'm really curious as to the kind of input you'll be getting from the submissions. It will be really fascinating whether it will be very precise submission, kind of very precise, like chapter and verse type of stuff, or they will be, well, let's make sure that this, and this, and then you guys kind of come up with the solution. It'd be fascinating. I'm sure Molly is going to tell us exactly what she has in her mind.
Thanks, Andre.
Miss Molly, you have the floor.
Thank you. And thank you, Sana. It's, I guess, a very exciting point for us in this process to get to have this more detailed conversation about the more functional and hopefully less controversial aspects of Article 6. But functions that we think are incredibly important, obviously, for making the guidance work for parties and for those who are actually engaging in cooperative approaches on the ground. So Andre, I know in your agenda you had gone through a series of questions. But before I guess getting to those, I wanted to take a step back and respond to some of the points that you and Sana made initially.
Tick, 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 tick.
First, agreeing that it's helpful to talk through the elements of reporting in this discussion and to not lose track of that, because all of this infrastructure that we're discussing should facilitate the information that parties are required to report, and nothing less and nothing more. And fortunately, we find that the reporting section of the Article 6.2 Annex, we don't think it is that confusing. For example, it clarifies that initial reports are to be updated and resubmitted for each new cooperative approach. That's at the end of that section. And recognizing that any given cooperative approach may involve countless ITMOs or at least a number of ITMO transfers. The information in initial reports is clearly about readiness of a party, of a cooperative approach. And so a new cooperative approach would clearly be what would trigger an update to that information. It's also clear to us anyway that registries are not necessarily national, that countries have or have access to them, which means that it may not be a national party registry that a party could facilitate an API with into a centralized system. And for that reason too, as you both mentioned, they won't necessarily be connected to the database. There's no references to connections of those registries to other systems, unless a party is using the international registry. And there are existing examples out there of registries that already support accounts for the public sector, accounts for private sector actors, national actors, subnational actors. And there's nothing that prevents parties from continuing to use these systems without requiring any international technical linkages. Such a linkage or an API typically exists when units themselves, their ownership, legal or property attributes, that kind of information is being transferred. And that won't be the case for all transferred volumes that parties are going to be reporting on, which I'll come back to in a minute. I just wanted to note regarding the comment or the point about the need for further guidance on authorizations. This is another area where we think that what we've got in the Article 6 outcome is pretty clear, that parties are to provide evidence of authorizations and information about who and what is authorized. But much of that is sort of implicit in the data, in the narrative that is reported in Article 6 reports. So there are places where parties are requested to disclose authorizations or where authorizations are a trigger for various actions. But we don't see any call for further guidance on the form of authorizations themselves. And this is important because these will also take a range of forms depending on the nature of the cooperative approach. And finally, it's clear to us anyway that the Article 6 database contains data. Country names, sector names, the name of the cooperative approach, these are data. There's no reference to initial reports or to narrative information that is connected to the database itself. There is a cross-reference between the data and the narrative information on the CARP, on the centralized platform, which seems to us to be the interface that packages all of these information types and in a way that tells a sort of comprehensive and coherent story about a party's engagement with cooperative approaches and about the cooperative approaches themselves. So looking at the questions that you put to us, Andre, in terms of the key elements of the architecture and how we understand them, I've already said a little bit about how we understand party registries, namely that they are registries that parties have or have access to, including the international registry for parties that don't have their own. And we see that reference of having access to as an important departure from the Kyoto system. And one that recognizes, like the rest of Article 6.2, that there are a range of systems that in some cases already exist that will support cooperative approaches. And some of these may not be directly administered by parties themselves. Parties will take responsibility for providing all the assurances that they are required to provide about these systems, but they may not be directly responsible for them. You know, for example, if we're talking about a gold standard or a World Bank, you know, credit certification system, those are not systems that the party itself directly administers and may not even be trading the underlying assets, but would be reporting on the transfers that it authorizes if it chooses to. Under CORSIA, for example, emissions units are canceled for compliance purposes in those eligible registry systems. And based on some lengthy requirements for transparency, for publication, for reporting, but those units are never transferred or surrendered to the state itself or to ICAO or canceled in some designated central account. All of that happens on those decentralized eligible registries. But we would still want parties to report on those transfers that they've authorized so that they're operating consistent with 6.2 guidance. And that's why we think it's important that whatever guidance comes out of this process, that it enables parties to report on those amounts that may be transacted or canceled under other systems. And the 6.2 text is clear about the functions that these registries need to perform. They may not use the same language for actions that can be taken by account holders, but they should provide the necessary transparency so that it's clear what actions are being taken or have been taken, and that that information can be reported consistent with the 6.2 guidance. Looking at the international registry, I would agree with Sana that this is one area where it's not particularly clear what its functionalities are, what the purpose of it was. And looking forward to discussions about this year. In our early discussions with parties about this registry, it was explained to us that some parties may wish to develop or innovate cooperative approaches that aren't based on or don't utilize existing registry systems, or even just existing certification systems or standards. They may want to develop their own. And that where that's the case, and particularly for developing countries, that this could be an international registry that performs the more traditional registry functions. So unique serialization of units, the facilitation of the transfer of ownership, and cancellation, and the types of things that are done to facilitate trades and transactions at a sort of transactional market level, whether that's between private sector actors or between parties. We've seen similar registry systems that support multiple markets, such as IHS Market, that serialize and facilitate these types of transfers, and the information that goes with the activities that generated the credits, particularly the more complex aspects of transferring ownership or property rights for those credits. So that is what we had been told parties' understanding of that platform was, and could see value in a system like that. For parties that want to innovate new types of crediting systems, and don't have access to existing registry systems, or would find more efficiencies with this one. Turning to the Article 6 database, we think it's another key aspect of tracking and reporting, if not the most important in a way, because it captures the more granular information on the transferred amounts that parties are reporting, and it does so annually. It also has important linkages to the data that is aggregated in biennial transparency reports. So here we see semi-regular information being submitted on adjustments and emissions balances, but also the underlying information about the transfers that sit a level or two down from those totals, the big numbers, so that we understand where the big numbers are coming from. Some of this is descriptive data about the origins of the ITMOs, including, the name of the cooperative approach that is associated with those volumes, the country where they were first transferred from, the activity type that resulted in those amounts, the sector, and also the vintage. We now know, of course, that first transfers are recorded and adjusted for by vintage. So the amounts reported under the year when the mitigation occurs. And that makes our guidance or our jobs in developing guidance in these tables a lot easier, because it gives us a clue as to how the tables themselves should be oriented. When it comes to the detailed information that's reported, we also see CORSIA's reporting requirements as a helpful reference, because very similar information is required to be reported under that system. So encourage folks to take a look at those existing standards and tables that have been developed. On that side, amounts are aggregated by batch. In other words, the total quantity that's reported is equal to the volume of units that all fit the same description and fall within the same series of serial numbers. So that you can say for, serial number batch that's equal to 1,000 units that starts with serial number A and ends with serial number Z. Here are the characteristics of those units: the country, the activity type, the cooperative approach. There they refer to it as the program. All of that is captured in one row in the table. And that work has been done by experts in ICAO, many of whom are also involved in this process. So, we're not necessarily starting 100% from scratch. At least there are some early lessons from that process. Of course, the database performs other functions as well, including identifying inconsistencies. This is one area where I think it remains to be seen what parties regard as inconsistencies. Considering that it's at least unclear to us whether first transferring parties and using parties will report on their transfers of ITMOs at the same time, so in the same reporting year. And if not, then there may be a question of the timing for checking inconsistencies, whether that's done on a continual basis or whether that's done at the end of an NDC timeframe. But we're certainly open to hearing from parties on that. And finally, we also know from paragraph 23J that biennially, this same information will be aggregated in tables that are appended to parties' BTRs. And that detailed information is aggregated into overarching amounts that are reported in the structured summary, but it isn't captured in detail in the structured summary, because that would be insanely unwieldy. So some of the same information that's recorded in the database is requested in those tables that are appended to BTRs. And here's another area where we see that there could be some efficiencies in thinking about one system also being able to support the other. And finally, looking at the CARP, the Centralized Accounting and Reporting Platform, it's clear to us in reading the Article 6 outcome that all of the central systems that are administered by the UNFCCC, so the International Registry, the Article 6 database, the information that's reported in BTRs, that all of that information links into the CARP. And we're also told that the purpose of that platform is for transparency in relation to cooperative approaches and to support review. And so I think that has informed our view that this platform is the up-to-date public interface for all of the information that's reported by parties, whether that's extracted by the Secretariat or if that's cross-linked to the public information that's provided by parties. In terms of Andre's question about the main issues for infrastructure that need clarification, we've agreed what we're going to clarify, namely the tables and the outlines for the information that's reported, and recommendations related to infrastructure, including the guidance for registries, the international registry, the database. Looking at the tables and outlines, we think that when it comes to narrative information to be submitted by parties, that this has already been substantially elaborated in the 6.2 annex. And hopefully conversations about that are not going to be complex. When it comes to tables and data that's reported, we think that largely pertains to the tables that would populate the Article 6 database, and those that would be submitted as an annex to parties' BTRs. And these tables are clearly related, considering that they call for the same information. So that can hopefully be an efficient work stream. And in terms of the electronic format itself, we're open to hearing from and discussing with parties what form that takes. When we raised this question previously, it seemed like parties were open to filling in this information themselves, for example, in a spreadsheet format, a tabular format that takes the sort of usual form, or to entering that information in an online form that serves as the sort of party interface with the database itself. And it's really a question of whether that database is something that parties have access to submit information directly, or if the Secretariat is populating that database with information that is submitted to them by parties. So I'll wrap it up there. Hopefully that answers some of your questions, Andre, but look forward to hearing from others. Thanks.
I think it would be fascinating if I were to hold the quiz. Now, Martin, you're muted, Martin.
Yeah, I had some slides. I don't know if I'm allowed to share them exactly, but
You're allowed to share them.
I'm allowed to share my slides. Oh my God. Okay, sorry.
I have got like powers to allow you to share.
You're going to see everything that I have on my desk. Okay, let me do this.
Not sure.
Right. First of all, I have to say that I am a dinosaur. My first job when I started all this in 2002, and they didn't know what to do with me, so they told me to go away and sort out Kyoto registries, and it was a very fruitful couple of years, but quite a complex one. And I know very well that the UNFCCC has had experience in both designing and implementing registries, since 2002, I guess, but definitely since 2005. So there's a lot of rich experience there. And if I was to summarize it, what I learned is that the more complicated it is, the more that go wrong and the longer we can spend discussing it, but also the more most expensive it is. So I don't know, can you see my slides now?
Well, we see there's a little black, okay, that triangle.
See me. I got rid of the little black triangle, which was me.
Now it, okay.
So I'll try and be really quick, but I had a really simple starting point, which was, let's go back and read what we decided and try and make some sort of visual sense of it. That's the way my mind works anyway. And so this is what I did. Now, this is probably wrong and not complete, but my understanding of reading the text is that we've got a CARP that has public information, and it's the public facing platform. Within it, we've got the database. Not all the information is public, but its function is recording and compiling information, enabling adjustment and consistency checks. Those are the basic functions laid out. And then we've got a series of reports where it seems pretty clear that the annual information relating to units and transactions, etc., is reported in an electronic format and placed in the database. Then we know that there's other bits of information, not all of it by any means, but some information from the initial report and the biannual information that kind of matches that and goes into the database. And then below all of that, we have these registry systems, which are focused on units and transactions. And so I kind of just did this little mind map, and there questions you could ask about it, missing portions of that, that need to be filled in. But I found that useful, first of all, in just trying to organize how it looks and what the flows are in my head. The first thing that's wrong with this diagram is that it says in the text that the international registry system can be part of the CARP. So that purple in some way is up there in that blue. But anyway, this is just a working sort of model for me to try and make sense of what it said in the text. I then thought, well, you know, this system, and it is a system, has a range of customers, right? That it's meant to deliver to, and what they want is defined in the guidance that we've operated. So the first customer are those that are required to have registries. So I guess all of us parties here, and we'll have to make a choice as to how we implement. We heard from Molly one approach where you might rely on existing registries. I think I'm almost sure that we will want to have a national registry or an account in an international registry if that's what's suitable to do. And then, of course, those that are using 6.4 will have the 6.4 registry to think about. And I'm interested in understanding the relationship between that 6.4 registry, which I saw is connected to the international registry, how that connects to the overall range of registry choices you have, sorting all those pieces out. What registry should I have, and how does it connect to everything else? But then the customers, those that are doing the reporting, and we have a separate strand of work on that, and we know there are 3 reports, but again, the system needs to work for those doing the reporting and meet the reporting requirements, or at least record what's in them. There are then those doing the consistency checks, Secretariat and the review teams, and there are requirements there that need to be implemented, and that'll be another customer, as I would put it. And then, of course, there are those that are authorized to hold and use units, parties themselves, and authorized participants. And then finally, there's the public, which is the CARP, I think, because that's where the public information comes from. So that's, for me, one way of thinking, you know, what the different demands on the system might be. And then, of course, I go right back to the text. And I know this is a bit boring because everyone's read it, but I still found it useful for me to go back and figure out how things relate. And it seems, as we've said, everyone has to have a registry, and the functions are kind of specified in paragraph 29. If you don't have or do not have access to a registry, there should be an international registry that's essentially doing all the same functions as 29, but it's available for you to use as your registry, essentially. And then, as I said in paragraph 31, this international registry is somehow part of the CARP system. Then when it looks at the database, it's the Secretariat implementing it, and it's got very particular functions with relation to units, and essentially it's a unit-focused database. Then you've got the CARP, which makes available the public information, as I said. And finally, this consistency checks and amendments that may be made in respect of the records in the database as a result of a Secretariat process. Now, I kind of stopped there because that's kind of the infrastructure. But of course, there are other things, and I had other things to say, the other demands, the review, the reporting, etc., which is more detail. But that was my starting point in terms of what we need to do. Now, we haven't discussed or prepared our submission in the EU, but I think we're probably going to lay out some very general views as to how we would like to see it working, and simplicity, ease of use, meeting the demands of the various customers are probably the sort of things that we're going to lay out. I was really glad to see that there's some detailed work going on within the Secretariat as to how to make this make sense in an operational way. I'm completely convinced that we do need to keep it very simple and not start elaborating things. I think we already have a quite complicated layout, particularly on the issues of, you know, how does a national, international, Article 6 registry work? These are options for parties. Is there a way of combining them or making them work in a simple way? Similarly, are there things in the initial and in the biennial reports that need to be recorded in the CARP that we need to be more clear about. How do we ensure that the database actually supports the consistency checks? And then again, what the demands of parties might be. Parties may have different interests or different capacities with respect to registries, so we need to respect that as well. And then, of course, finally, we need to decide on exactly what the public-facing information is. That there are requirements there, but that might need to be elaborated. So that's a very short presentation as my kind of first take on what we need to do, and I'm really interested in making sure that over the year we get much more resolute. But I would say there's a point at which I don't think it's a matter of negotiation, it's a matter of technical design. And I do remember the shift in terms of registry requirements, data exchange requirements for the ITL, which were pretty much under very close supervision of negotiators, in a sense, negotiated. But there's a point at which these become kind of technical questions, and we will need to get those that understand IT systems and how they work involved in making them real. But that's it, really.
Okay, Martin, thank you very much for this. I think that, okay, do you want to stop sharing the screen so we can go to Felipe? Felipe is,
right. Just give me a moment.
Yeah, I will help you with that. I think I can
disable me.
I will disable you. I've disabled you.
Thank you.
There you go. I wish I could do that more often, but it's only the only time I can do it. Felipe?
Hi, Andre, can you hear me?
We can hear you well.
Good. Good to see you. Good to see you, Martin. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Good to see you all. Happy New Year. Let's see. It's been a very interesting conversation. I'll start framing this by saying, as many of you might know or might recall, my actual job is to do local implementation in Costa Rica. The negotiations is basically what I do for fun. And so in that context, I've been quite busy sort of trying to figure out what the implications of what we agreed to in Glasgow are for our systems. One of the big chunks of my work in my local implementation role has been to design and to co-lead the development of our national climate change metric system, which you've all heard me talk about before. And that includes, amongst other things, the module that supports our national greenhouse gas inventory development and what we would call our mitigation action registry, the module that helps us keep track of our mitigation actions. And there's been quite a lot of technical development behind these, both in terms of guidance and in terms of actual IT system development. And so now that we have clear Article 6 rules, and this was always intended to be the case, but we were waiting for Article 6 rules, we have to work from the national greenhouse gas inventory to the mitigation actions to whatever is going to be transacted on international carbon markets. And again, we don't necessarily think we'll be doing international carbon markets as any substantial part of our decarbonization efforts, but we do recognize that some of our private sector participants may be and probably will be participating in some of these mechanisms. We do have some connections to the JCM, to the FCPF and the World Bank. So there are things that we have to implement in terms of infrastructure, regardless of this not being one of our, say, main strategies in terms of decarbonizing the country. And so in that sense, we've been working at what does this mean in practice for our systems. And so if I may, I'll very quickly share one quick diagram of how we've been thinking through this and what we are developing so that I can talk through it. And so hopefully you're seeing a rather colorful, very simple diagram where you'll see a top left-hand corner has a mitigation action register, Registro de Acciones de Mitigación. And this again is a module that already exists. It's part of our existing climate change metric system. And it is a big database of mitigation actions, right? There's a substantial guidance. This was developed mostly with support from the World Bank's PMR, but has been taken over by the CBIT program or by support with support from the CBAT program to be more accurate. And this includes information about the programs themselves, where it's located, who's developing it. And this is every mitigation action that wants to be recognized by the government, right? So you'll have things here that are going to be credit or potentially credit producing, and others that are not. For example, educational actions and things like these would also be registered here. And so there's quite a process that you have to go through to be allowed to be registered. And there's a pretty detailed document. It's unfortunately only available in Spanish for now. We're looking at having it translated for others. But it'll get you the vast majority of the information about the project that might be needed in a system. One of the last questions in that mitigation action register asks you basically, are you intending to participate in international carbon markets? And if you do, it opens up a new set of modules, and those modules are currently being developed. Those are the two yellow modules in the middle. And that's our environmental integrity evaluation module and our national convenience evaluation module. And those basically evaluate whether, and this is what we call our export criteria that's being officialized by presidential decree, hopefully by the end of next month, as one of the last acts of the current presidency. And it basically lays out what criteria have to be met for a international carbon market credit export to receive authorization, approval, and eventually authorization for a corresponding adjustment. It has to do with ensuring that we meet basically the San Jose principles and a couple of additional things in terms of ensuring environmental integrity. And it has to do with making sure that we have thought through whether this transaction makes sense for the country in terms of delivering on its NDC, delivering on its long-term goals. And I'm happy to go into the details of what's evaluated in that one. But basically, we look at whether it has the ability to generate additional mitigation, whether it is what we call transformational, and we have quite a bit of methodological work done on how we assess transformational change. And we've still got a long way to go there, but quite a bit of interesting stuff there. Or whether it has gone through what is the formal national convenience process, which culminates in a presidential decree of national convenience. And that's basically to provide some flexibility to the executive for the executive to make this part of broader processes. And so if a unit has gone through both evaluations, it is integral and it is convenient for the country, then it goes out into what we call our national carbon credit registry. And this is basically what I would say is our national registry in the context of the Article 6 rules that we've agreed. And it is not a transactional platform. It is not where people are going to come in and buy or sell credits from Costa Rica. What it is I would say basically a big public ledger, a big public sheet of paper that says project Andres hydroelectric project has been authorized to send or to export 1,000 tons to the gold standard through the JCM. And what that means will depend on what the arrangements for registries are with the JCM, and where that's being bought and sold will depend on the ERPA arrangements and the registry arrangements with the JCM. But what it does mean, it is a public place where everybody can see exactly what Costa Rica has authorized, where it's going, and it will be linked to the broader infrastructure. In our case, it's being designed to be linked through the climate warehouse to all of these other registries. And thanks to that collaboration to the climate registry, and in no small measure, thanks to Chandra, who I think is on this call, we were linked to Chia, a IT developer, a startup that's working with a different version of the blockchain that is not as energy intensive and is not as resource intensive as the blockchain we're all accustomed to thinking about, but that does the same things. And so and who is going to be developing the prototype climate warehouse, the full-on climate warehouse prototype. We've in Glasgow signed a collaboration agreement, an MOU with them to develop a registry place, basically this open source ledger, this version of truth is what we call it, right? Because if we recognize that we're all going to be linking to a series of systems, registries, whatever we want to call them, in different places and from different mechanisms. As a country, Costa Rica wants to know that it has its own version of the truth, right? That it does not depend on a bunch of international systems. I was talking to a colleague recently. I was saying, would you trust a system? Would you trust your bank if it still relied on snail mail to send international transactions across the world? I definitely wouldn't. And I don't think the international carbon markets will either. So ensuring that we have, as a country, our own version of truth, that it is clear for anybody anywhere to be able to go there and see, okay, this project has been authorized by Costa Rica, and here's the link to the authorization, and here's the link to everything else that is related to this project, back to that database of mitigation actions, back and forward to wherever it is being transacted, the transaction platform where it's actually being bought and sold. All of these interactions have to be managed. There has to be transparency through them. And so what we are basically looking at is making sure that as the shared infrastructure gets developed, we have a very clear version that is our version of truth, that is public for everyone to see, and that enables us to know where everything related to Costa Rica is, regardless of where it lands on the broader international infrastructure. And so you'll see that the 4 modules on top are basically boxed in a light blue bigger box that represents that they're all parts of the same broader system, the same CINAMEC system. And as parts of CINAMEC, they are all being developed in open source software with a copyleft intellectual property license. And so they're available for other countries and other participants to look at, to download, to expand on, to edit, and would be happy to collaborate with others who might be interested. Hope that's useful. Thanks.
So Felipe will be, you'll allow us to share this slide with others. I assume.
Yeah, I'll send you a slightly better version, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that, I'm not sure. I think we have been overly irresponsible. I mean, we have been not overly, but we've been responsible in underestimating the amount of discussion that we're having on different topics. I think we're going to have trouble with all the topics that we have today. And I think that what we're going to do, we're going to go through the things that we can, have people listen to this, and we'll come back next time and people having internalized it, maybe we'll get into the conversation, Felipe. It's a lot of stuff. Kazu, you're up to bat now, as they say in Costa Rica.
Thank you, Andre. And maybe after all the presentation and also recognizing the time, I'm trying to be brief. And basically, I just wanted to contribute to the understanding on what we have agreed. And the slide which I'm showing, and of course happy to share, is summarizing all the decisions on this, particularly 6.2 reporting in the infrastructure part. I just pick some of the slides, which hopefully could be helpful for understanding. And I'm not going all the details. I just wanted to say in the reporting, we have 3 layers of reporting, starting from initial report, and as also annual information and regular informations, and try to sort out what kind of information we need to report under such reporting requirements. And particularly, I also wanted to point to the annual information, which is, we understand that this is a subject of our discussion. We need to develop tables or outlines for the reporting, which includes those information. So first, what we need to know when we discussing this is what kind of information we need to report under this annual information. And also, I recognized, just comparing with the COP25 draft decisions, we have new, items or things are also included. So, what my message here is, we need to understand what kind of information that we need to report, and also. We are also trying to develop some, some proposal for the tables, which hopefully maybe next meeting or after submission we can discuss further. But a couple of points in terms of when we are capturing those reports and the information, particularly for the quantitative data, we need to look at the kind of a format that capture the different items, including annual information, annual transfer, and the cumulative informations, and also those which are authorized. So we need to think about how those information could be summarized in a way to be not too much complicated, but more easy to report. So as Mori mentioned, that we know there are some experience from the COSIA, and of course we have some experience from Kyoto, like a standardized electronic format, which has been also exercised under the Kyoto. So we can learn from this. At the same time, we need to think about how this information could be organized. And also in the background information mentioned in the right, we have several other information such as year of reductions and sectors, activity types, and also we need to report entity and unique identifiers. So I think how to deal with those background informations and how to fit into the any certain format, that's something we need to think about in terms of reporting. So next slide, please. So I think we previous speakers also talks about the what CAP constitute, what CAP looks like. And again, maybe this is a little bit of the interpretation, but we try to kind of capture what was decided from 6.2 text annex. And of course, it's a public information and includes national registry, then including reporting. I think it's important to understand. And hearing from previous speakers, I think we have a similar understanding. But I think it's good to discuss what constitutes the CAP. And at least from the readings of these decisions, it includes international registry and public information related to the report. So it means it includes the initial report, annual information, regular information, and also mention about review of Article 6. So it needs to be incorporated these. Yeah, and also relationship with the each country's registries. Our understanding they need to submit information based on the annual information. And also international registry is the more direct linkage with each parties. And also I have to mention that international registry is also linked to the 6.4 registry, which is also written in the 6.4 decisions. So we need to have a same understanding on what CAP constitutes and what it looks like. And based on that, we can develop more detailed information. Yeah, so and my last point is that we also need to think about the KP infrastructure, how we can learn from it. I think Martin mentioned about the those KP experience. I think we can learn from those infrastructure development from the KP. And also this year under SBI, we also will discuss the CDM registry and how that could be transferred to the 6.4 registry. I think that is also the part of this whole infrastructure discussion. So I think we need to also keep that in our mind. I'll stop here, and then the third page is just to lay out what we need to do this year. I think the Pelma also mentioned about the timeline for this year, and hopefully this could summarize in a good way what we need to do, starting from submission and then the workshops and what we need to decide at Substar and COP. So just for the information for us. I'll stop here. Thanks.
Thanks, Kazu. Look, this has been fascinating, and there's a lot of information and all the slides trying to explain the vision that different people have. I think there's some commonality. I think I would have questions, but it almost sounds, I'm looking at, I have Martin and Kazoo on the screen now, but it almost sounds like this whole discussion on this is not an hour and a half discussion. It's a day workshop where people actually have the ability to go through each slide and understand what each slide means, because that is quite elaborate. So what I wanted to give the opportunity to a few people to raise any questions, but I think we're going to have to move on, and we will, unless people tell us that not available, not allowed, we would like to distribute these, get the opportunity to have another conversation, especially in Article 6.2 infrastructure, because those are due in end of March. So I think that Kazoo, Martin, I think it'd be interesting to let people, allow people to study these and come back. Is there anyone that is right now wants to have a crack at this and any kind of issues, or you guys want to react to what you heard about from the other folks? I mean, do you see discrepancies between what you have presented? I think it's a lot of stuff to digest. I think there's a lot of stuff to digest. Martin, what Kazoo and Molly and Felipe, I think that ourselves, we would want to study this further and come back at the next session. Again, Kazoo's or the Ministry of Environment of Japan session are going to be to some degree also involving into some of the stuff that is very practical. This would continue to be focused on the negotiation and understanding the vision behind some of these things. I think that we will learn also, probably there will be some discussion like this in your own session in some way, probably, Kazoo. So I think this is going to be an iterative process, because this is not simple for many people.